Hey y'all, welcome back to another new video. Today we are going to be talking about the Sacred 28. So the Sacred 28 is the 28 families that in the 30s and 40s were still believed to be fully pureblood. And so I'm going to be going through all 28 families and what we know about them and the most important, members of it that were mentioned in the Harry Potter series. And so I hope you guys enjoy. In the 1930s or 1940s, an anonymous publication was published that listed off the Sacred 28. The 28 families that were still considered to be fully pureblood at the time. And these are the families that would eventually be strongly embraced by Voldemort himself. Not all of them went along with it, but he tried to get all of those families involved in his movement. A lot of these families took it as a great honor. Most of the wizarding community kind of looked upon it as strange because they all felt that the wizarding community would have died out if some people didn't mate with muggles, which is probably true. Salazar Slytherin was one of the original perpetrators who created this idealization of blood purity and really started this being like a fanatical thing that people believed in. So like I said, I'm going to be going through the 28 families, talking about the characters that we know from the Harry Potter series and what sort of general information we know about each family. It's not going to be super in-depth about any one family, but sort of a general overview so we can get an idea of who these 28 families are. And so the first family is the Abbots. At some point this family lived in Godric's Hollow because a grave of one of the family members is seen there. But the main character we know of the Abbots is Hannah. She was in the trio's year and was the first of that year to be sorted. She was a Hufflepuff and she fought bravely in the Battle of Hogwarts on the good side, against the Death Eaters. And she went on to marry Neville Longbottom. So there are the Averys, and they are only mentioned by surname in the Harry Potter series. For example, we hear of an Avery just having left the room from the Slug Club party when Tom Riddle asks Professor Slughorn about how to create Horcruxes. We know at least some of the family members were supporters of Voldemort and Death Eaters because a Death Eater named Avery was present at the ambush at the Department of Mysteries, and he was said to have escaped imprisonment after the First War because he had claimed to be under the Imperious Curse. Next is the Black family, and if you're interested in hearing more in depth about that family, I have done a YouTube video a few weeks ago on the entire Black family tree. I go super in depth, so I'd recommend checking that out if you're interested in learning more about them. And most of them were in Slytherin, major exception being Sirius Black, who was in Gryffindor. And many of the Blacks were either Death Eaters or at the very least supporters of Voldemort. Sirius was disowned from his family for being what is considered to be a blood traitor, meaning a pureblood who sympathizes with Muggleborns or Muggles. And Sirius used his London home, Grimmauld Place, as the headquarters for the Order of the Phoenix, which really pissed off a lot of the ancestors that had stayed there as ghosts or spirits. Brother Regulus Black was a Death Eater who then switched sides and had tried to destroy a Horcrux, the Locket. Other notable Blacks include Bellatrix Lestrange. She was one of, if not the most fanatical supporters of Voldemort. Also Narcissa Malfoy, who though never a Death Eater herself, really believed in Voldemort's ideas and was very engulfed in Death Eater culture through her marriage to Lucius Malfoy. Fourth is the Bulstrode family. We really only meet Millicent Bulstrode. She is a Slytherin in the same year as the trio and Draco. Her and Draco seem to be friends in their first few years, but then we don't really hear about her in the later few years, so they probably maybe stopped being friends. And her and Hermione did not get along at all. They had several spats. And we also know that Millicent owned a cat, and we know this through Hermione's unfortunate encounter with her cat through the Polyjuice Potion. Fifth is the Burkes, and they are most known for opening the shop Borgin and Burkes, which is a shop for dark artifacts. Burke, who is the namesake for the store, is Caraticus Burke. We see him through Harry's eyes when Harry goes into the Pensieve and sees Burke buying Salazar Slytherin's old locket from Voldemort's mother when she was really poor and pregnant. Sixth is the Carrows. We meet Amicus and Alecto Carrow. They are siblings and both were Death Eaters, and they were recruited during what would have been the 7th year if the trio had gone at Hogwarts to instill some discipline on the students, aka to spy on people leading resistance movements. Next is the Crouches, and first of all we know Bartimus Crouch. He would have lived a very calm, ordered life as working for the Ministry if it wasn't for his son Barty Crouch Jr. becoming a Death Eater. Bartimus Crouch Sr. didn't know Barty was a Death Eater, and when he found out he sent his own son to Azkaban, which I think was the right thing to do. However, Barty Crouch Jr. escaped Azkaban and went to Hogwarts and imprisoned and impersonated Mad-Eye Moody in order to try and deliver Harry to Voldemort at the end of the Triwizard Tournament, and he also killed his own father and transfigured his body into a bone. Next are the Fowleys, and no members of this pureblood family are mentioned in the Harry Potter series, so we don't really know anything about them. 9 is the Flint's, and we only meet Marcus Flint. He was the head of the Slytherin Quidditch team, and we don't know much about him. He kind of seemed like a jerk, but other than that, we don't really know anything about him. 10th is the Gaunts. And Marvolo Gaunt is Tom Riddle's grandfather. We also know of Morthen Gaunt, who would have been Tom Riddle's uncle. And they were obsessed with their pureblood status, and they were the only living descendants of Salazar Slytherin, which they were very proud of. And they terrorized Merope Riddle. Merope is Tom Riddle, Voldemort Tom Riddle's mother, Morphin's brother, and Marvolo's daughter. And they terrorized her, calling her a squib. She wasn't one, she was a witch, but they still said she was a squib. And they were known for attacking muggles. They attacked several muggles, and for this both of them were sent to Azkaban. And this left Merope all alone, which is when she enchanted the muggle Tom Riddle Sr. to fall in love with her, and he got her pregnant, and they gave birth to Voldemort. The 11th family is the Greengrasses, and we only hear one mention of Daphne Greengrass. She is a Slytherin in the Trios and Draco's Year. Like I said, she only gets mentioned one time in the book, but her younger sister, Astoria, goes on to marry Draco Malfoy. It is unclear of when that relationship really started, though. Next are the Lestranges. Rodolphus Lestrange is the husband of Bellatrix, and they are among Voldemort's most fanatical, loyal supporters. And Bellatrix was killed during the Battle of Hogwarts by Molly Weasley, and Rodolphus was injured. 13 is the Longbottom family, and we know Neville very well, of course, throughout the Harry Potter series. And he was raised by his grandma, Augusta Longbottom, and this was because his parents were unable to raise him. Alice and Frank Longbottom were Aurors and members of the original Order of the Phoenix, but they were tortured by the Lestranges to the point of insanity and had to live out the rest of their life in St. Mungo's. However, Neville kills Nagini in the Battle of Hogwarts, which basically allows for the defeat of Voldemort to happen, and so he avenges what happened to his parents in the end, which obviously is still horrible. And he goes on to be the herbology professor at Hogwarts. 14 is the Macmillans, and we see Ernie. He is a Hufflepuff and a really good friend of Cedric Diggory, and him and Harry have a few spats, but they still remain really good friends. And 15 is the Malfoys. Obviously, we know Narcissa and Lucius. They were Voldemort's supporters. Lucius was a Death Eater, Narcissa wasn't one officially, but they defected from them in the end, which is how they avoided going to Azkaban. I think they really just did it to save themselves, and their ideology doesn't really seem to change because they look down on their son Draco and his wife Astoria for raising Scorpius, Draco and Astoria's son, their grandson, to be a tolerant person, so it doesn't really seem like they actually changed their tune. Next is the Knott family. We know Theodore Knott. He's one of Draco's friends. He's a Slytherin, and his dad is a Death Eater. He was summoned by Voldemort upon his return in the Goblet of Fire, and he was one of the first Death Eaters, and Cantankerous Knott is believed to be the author of the Sacred 28. However, this is just a rumor. We don't know officially who wrote it. 17 is the Ollivander family. They're one of the oldest wizarding families, and they've been in the business of wand making since 382 BC, so for over 2,000 years. 18 is the Parkinsons. We know Pansy Parkinson. She's a Slytherin. She was an early friend of Draco. They possibly dated a bit, and she was a bully, and JKR has said that she didn't end up having Draco and Pansy get married because while Draco has some redemption and grows and changes as a person, Pansy does not. 19 is the Pruitt. So Molly Weasley's maiden name is Pruitt. She was originally a Pruitt. And her brothers Gideon and Fabian were killed by Death Eaters in the First Wizarding War. And Antonin Dolohue was convicted for their murders, but it is said that 4 other Death Eaters were involved in the killing of them. Which, I mean, 5 to 2, they were pretty powerful. Number 20 is the Rossiers. We only hear of Evan Rossier, and he was a Death Eater killed in the First Wizarding War. Then is the Rowley family. We only hear of Forthin Rowley. He was another Death Eater, and he was supposed to be the one that snatched the trio when they were in London during the Deathly Hallows, but he failed at this and presumably got in big trouble with Voldemort for failing to do this. 22 is the Selwyns, and Dolores Umbridge claims to be a member of this family, but it is not sure if she's telling the truth about that or not. And we hear of a Death Eater named Selwyn was involved in the kidnap of Luna Lovegood. 23 is the Shacklebolts. We know Kingsley Shacklebolt. He was a great Auror, and his job during the Second Wizarding War was to protect the Muggle Prime Minister, and he was temporarily Minister of Magic himself. 24 is the Shaffigs, and they make no appearances in the Harry Potter stories either. 25 is the Slughorns, and we obviously know of Horace Slughorn. He was a potions master, and for a while the head of Slytherin House before his retirement. Eventually, you know, he returns for a year. And most importantly, he was the one that told Tom Riddle about how to make a Horcrux, which obviously he feels a ton of guilt and shame for. But he makes up for this in the end by finally revealing the true memory to Harry and Dumbledore, which basically allows them to put all the pieces together and eventually defeat Voldemort. He was also known for his slug club and his parties where he sort of collected the most bright students. This is just my opinion, but he's a little creepy. 26 is the Travers family, and one of the Death Eaters to escape Azkaban had this surname, and he was involved in the murder of the McKinnons. 27 is the Weasley family, and they are one of like the biggest wizarding families, and they will probably continue for generations even though they are no longer pureblood through Ron's marriage to Hermione and Ginny's marriage to Harry. But their family will still continue on for generations, just not really pureblood anymore, and they don't really care about that. They've been regarded as blood traitors for generations for not caring about being pureblood and for, you know, sympathizing with muggles and muggle-born people. And last is the Yaxleys, and we only hear of one Yaxley, and he is a Death Eater. That is all I have for you guys, and I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I would love to hear any requests for longer YouTube videos that you have in the comments. And until next time, bye y'all!